Hello students! Today, we will be discussing the theories of evolution. The most essential learning competency is to explain the occurrence of evolution. I just want to say that prior to this video, we have already discussed the evidences of evolution. So kung hindi mo pa yan napapanood, meron akong ilalagay na link dyan sa taas para pwede mo siyang balikan kung hindi mo pa napapanood ang video ko para sa lesson na yon. On your screen, you can see the names of two major scientists who contributed in the study of evolutionary theory. They are Jean-Baptiste Lamarck and Charles Darwin. But before we go to their actual contributions, let's first discuss the history of evolutionary thought. So ano ba yung mga paniniwala ng mga tao bago dumating si Jean-Baptiste Lamarck at si Charles Darwin? The first theory or belief is called catastrophism. This was proposed by Abraham Werner and Baron George Cuvier. So what does catastrophism tell us? Catastrophism states that the Earth and geological events had formed suddenly as a result of some great catastrophe. Catastrophism from the root word catastrophe. Ibig sabihin, delubyo. So ano ba yung mga example ng delubyo? Makikita natin sa ating screen. Meron dyang illustration ng parang pagbabangga ng dalawang planet. So that could be a catastrophe or an asteroid hitting the Earth or Noah's flood. Those are examples of catastrophes. The next one is uniformitarianism. What is uniformitarianism? Uniformitarianism tells us that the Earth has always changed in uniform ways and that the present is the key to the past. It means that large geological changes occurred not in catastrophic events, but in gradual accumulation of small geological changes over long period of time. So yun yung kaibahan ng uniformitarianism kay catastrophism. Let's move now to the highlight of our discussion. But let's start first with Jean-Baptiste Lamarck. Who is Jean-Baptiste Lamarck? Lamarck developed one of the first theories on how species changed. He concluded that organisms of higher complexity had evolved from pre-existing, less complex organisms. Meron siyang tatlong theory. So ano yung tatlong theory na yon? First, we have the theory of need. Second, we have the theory of use and disuse. And third, we have the theory of acquired characteristics. Dito gagamitin natin yung pinaka-classic na example ng pagpapaliwanag ng mga theory sa evolution at yun yung mga giraffe. Meron tayong tinatawag na Lamarck's giraffe tapos meron din tayo mamaya na Darwin's giraffes. Iko-compare natin sila. Punta muna tayo sa giraffe ni Lamarck. When I say giraffe ni Lamarck, I'm not really saying that he owned a giraffe, but this is his visualization of a giraffe during the early times. So what can you notice between the two? It is very obvious that the neck of this giraffe is shorter compared to the picture on the right side, which is the normal giraffe. Now let's discuss the three theories in terms of these giraffes. First is the theory of need. It says that organisms change because they need to. And for an organism to evolve a structure, it must need the structure. This theory revolves on need, pangangailangan. Kung kailangan niya, magbabago siya. Ano ba yung pinaka-eksaktong sinabi ni Lamarck dito? Sabi niya, yung mga ninuno ng mga modern giraffe na meron tayo ngayon ay maliliit na version nila. So, ibig sabihin, maliliit na species, maiiksi ang kanilang mga leeg. Yun yung unang panahon daw. Tapos, nagkaroon daw ng mahabang drought or tagtuyot since giraffes are herbivores, they eat plants. Technically, what will happen is that all of the plants around them, the leaves of the plants all around them, mauubos agad yan. Lalo na yung mga halaman na ka-height nila or mas mababa ang height sa kanila kasi yun lang naman ang naaabot nila, di ba? So dahil marami sila, marami yung population nila doon, anong nangyari? Naubos yun. Tagtuyot nga, di ba? Drought. Pero may mga puno na mataas, hindi nila abot. Para sila ay makasurvive, kailangan nilang maabot yung mga puno na yon. There is a need, di ba? Kailangan nilang kumain, so kailangan nilang magbago. Doon nagsisimula yung theory ni Lamarck. Ano ba bang example ng mga needs na pwedeng mag-cause ng change? For example, birds developed wings because their ancestors developed the need to fly. Elephants, on the other hand, have long trunks, yung parang sa ilong nila na mahaba, kasi they use it for gathering food. And lions have gathering claws and jaws for capturing prey. Each organism therefore adapts to suit its particular way of life. May need sila, kaya sila ay nagbabago. Next, theory of use and disuse. Remember, if you don't use it, you lose it. Pag hindi mo ginagamit, mawawala. Organisms develop specialized characteristics by the use and disuse of organs. So, bakit nga ba humaba ang leeg ni giraffe? Kasi, babalikan natin si theory of need. Sabi natin kanina, kailangan maabot ni giraffe na merong maikling leeg yung mga puno na may mas matataas na height. Kasi kailangan nilang mabuhay. Ngayon, ang gagawin ni giraffe, aabutin at aabutin niya yung puno na mataas. I-stretch niya yung leeg niya hanggang sa maabot niya yung mga puno na yon. Just like what you can see in the picture. Yun ang dahilan daw, according to Lamarck, kung bakit humaba yung leeg ng giraffe. Ngayon, anong kaibahan ni use and disuse? For the law of use, the parts of the body of any organism that is used becomes stronger and more developed. While for parts that are unused, ito na yung law of disuse, they become weaker and eventually disappear. Since giraffes always use their neck, kasi nga kailangan nilang umabot ng pagkain, nagagamit yon, nagiging stronger at nagiging developed. That is according to Jean-Baptiste Lamarck. Also, as an example, he said that water birds like this, diba, pato or duck, after years of straining their toes to swim, diba, kakalangoy nila, anong nangyari? Nakadevelop sila ng webbed toes. Itong parang extra skin. And those webbed toes or webbed feet help these water birds to swim. Next, the theory of acquired characteristics. So what does it say? It says that if a parent acquires a body structure during its lifetime, it could pass on that characteristic structure to its offspring. So, 'di ba kanina na nga sa theory of need, kailangan kumain ni giraffe. So, ang gagawin niya, i-stretch niya ng i-stretch yung kanyang leeg hanggang sa humaba. That would be theory of use and disuse. Ngayon, sa theory of acquired characteristics, sabi dito, dahil si adult or si parent giraffe, napahaba niya yung leeg niya during that time na nabubuhay siya, pwede daw niyang maipasa yon sa kanyang offspring. So, possible na yung anak niya ay mahahaba na yung leeg kasi acquired characteristic niya yung paghaba ng kanyang leeg. Okay, so those are what the theories of Lamarck explain to us. Yun ay yung kanyang view during that time. However, a lot of experiments disproved these theories, especially the third theory, which is the theory of acquired characteristics. So for example, petals on flowers. Kapag tinanggal mo yung petal ng flower, hindi ibig sabihin nun na yung ibang mga uusbong na flower ay ubos na or bawas na yung petal niya. Kung ano yung normal number of petal, yun pa rin usually ang nag-grow sa isang plant. Next, corsets. Siguro familiar kayo rito if you're watching Bridgerton in Netflix. Ito yung ginagamit usually ng mga medieval women kung gusto nilang mapaliit yung kanilang waist. Nagsusuot sila ng sobrang sikip na corset para magkaroon sila ng shape. So, syempre, dahil sanay yung katawan ng isang babae na magsuot ng ganyan, nagkakaroon na ng shape yung kanyang katawan. That would be her acquired characteristic. But it does not mean that her offspring or her child would develop the same body na merong shape na. Another thing, if you exercise frequently, you will become healthier, your muscles will become more developed. However, you cannot pass on that characteristic to your offspring, to your child. And finally, tails of mice. May ginawang isang experiment dito, ng isang scientist. Ang ginawa niya, pinutol niya yung mga buntot ng mga daga. Maraming daga yun. Pero, nakita naman nila na kahit naputol na yung buntot ng daga, yung mga anak niya, buo pa rin yung buntot. So these are just some examples of instances that will disprove Lamarck's theory. Kaya dito na po papasok si Charles Darwin. Who is Charles Darwin? Charles Darwin proposed an entirely different mechanism to account for the evolution of species. His theory of evolution is by natural selection. This became the foundation of modern evolutionary studies. So ano bang ginawa ni Charles Darwin? So si Charles Darwin ay naglakbay gamit ang isang barko na tinatawag nating HMS Beagle. He traveled this route until he reached Galapagos Islands. Actually, marami siyang stopover, but then we will be highlighting Galapagos Islands because this is the place where he found a lot of evidences for his theory. As you can see, it took him 5 years to travel using the HMS Beagle, 1831 to 1836. During his travel, he was able to collect many specimens and documented many of his observations. Sabi ko nga kanina, ang focus natin is the Galapagos Islands. The Galapagos Islands can be found on the left side of South America on the map. Galapagos Islands is the muse of Darwin's theory of evolution. He actually spent only 5 weeks but he learned a lot of things. Ano ba yung pinaka nagbigay sa kanya ng data? Ano ba yung nakita ni Charles Darwin sa Galapagos Islands? Charles Darwin found finches. So yung finch na yan, it's a type of bird. He was able to see around 13 varieties of finches with different sizes, shapes, and yung beak nila, iba-iba din ang itsura. So island to island, iba-iba yung varieties ng finches na nakita niya. Considering na magkakalapit yung islands na yon, meron siya nakitang 13 varieties. So from these finches and from other organisms that he found there, it took him 20 years to organize the data. 5 weeks lang siya doon, marami siyang nakuhang data, pero it took him 20 years to organize those data. Here we can see the different types of finches that Charles Darwin saw in Galapagos Islands. Sabi ko nga kanina, iba-iba sila ng itsura ng beak. Why? Because these beaks adapt to different surroundings. May mga finch na kumakain ng prutas, may mga finch na kumakain ng insects, merong cactus ang kinakain, meron namang seeds. And iba-iba rin sila ng function. Also, iba-iba din ng habitat. Merong sa ground lang nakatira, meron ding sa puno. So, from this data, from the data of the finches, Charles Darwin was able to write a book entitled The Origin of Species. In this book, he presented his theory of evolution, which is based on natural selection. By the way, Darwin is not the only person who had the idea of natural selection. There was another scientist with the name Alfred Russel Wallace who sent a manuscript to Darwin about his studies. They have almost the same concept, natural selection. And then a year after, Darwin published his book on the origin of species. But what is natural selection? Natural selection tells us that individuals within a population with the most favorable traits for an environment survive and pass on those traits. In short, survival of the fittest. The theory of natural selection has 6 main points. What are those points? First, species overproduction. According to this, organisms tend to over-reproduce. For example, the fern that you can see on the screen, they produce millions of spores, and then frogs, fish, and other organisms, they produce a lot of eggs or offsprings. Next, competition. Although there are a lot of organisms produced, kasi sabi natin kanina, over-reproduction, there will still be a struggle of existence and the survival of the fittest. Why? Because we have limited space and limited resources. Food are limited. So there will always be competition. Next concept is variation. During this time, they don't have any idea about mutation. Although we have already discussed that a few weeks ago, during this time, they don't know that. So variation means that no two individuals are the same, and plants and animals, even of the same species, differ in size, strength, and adaptive structures. And speaking of adaptive, we have adaptation. Adaptation is a process of becoming better suited to the environment. Adaptation would increase an organism's chance of survival. So because of variation, some individuals will be better adapted to survive and reproduce compared to others. Next, natural selection. It says that the environment selects organisms that survive to be the parents of succeeding generations. Syempre, kung hindi nag-survive, mamatay yun, hindi na magiging parent yun. So, kung sino lang yung mga nag-survive, sila yung mga may magagandang traits, sila lang yung pwedeng maging parent. And then, finally, speciation. It says that favorable adaptations gradually accumulate in the species and unfavorable ones disappear. So yung mga traits natin na hindi naman nakakatulong sa atin, nawawala na yan paunti-unti. Now, how do we compare Darwin's giraffes to Lamarck's giraffes? Kanina sabi natin, balikan lang natin, sabi ni Lamarck, yung mga giraffe nung unang panahon, maiikli ang leeg. Pero dahil kailangan nilang kumain, dahil kailangan nilang maabot ang mga matataas na puno, inabot nila ng inabot iyon hanggang sa humaba ang kanilang mga leeg. Pero according to Darwin, that is incorrect. According to Darwin, during the early times, there are giraffes with different varieties. There are giraffes with long necks. There are giraffes with medium length necks, and then meron ding mga giraffe na maiiksi talaga ang kanilang mga leeg. So ano nangyari? During the long drought, sabi nga natin kanina, kailangang maabot yung mga puno na matataas. So, ibig sabihin, kung sino lang ang makakaabot sa puno na yun lang ang magsusurvive. At yun yung mga giraffe na mahahaba ang leeg. Kaya ngayon, wala na tayo mga giraffe na maiikli ang leeg. Okay? So this is a comparison of Lamarck and Darwin's giraffes placed side by side. Another example of natural selection is the case of peppered moths. Before the Industrial Revolution in Britain, bale ano ba yung Industrial Revolution? Ito yung panahon in around 1760s to 1800s kung saan nagkaroon ng development ng mga machineries, ng mga industries. These peppered moths, yung variety niya na maputi, yan yung mas madami. Bakit? Kasi nakakapag-camouflage sila doon sa mga puno. Kasi yung mga puno nun light ang kulay, not this picture. Kasi dark na yung kulay niya. Tapos, ito naman, yung mutant black coloring naman na peppered moths, they were easily spotted and eaten by birds. Therefore, the white peppered moth would have an advantage. However, di ba alam naman natin nangyari sa Industrial Revolution, after that, nagkaroon na ng mga pagsusunog ng coal, so nagkaroon na ng concept ng pollution. During that time, after the Industrial Revolution, airborne pollution was introduced, and then this pollution covered the trees with soot, making them colored black, just like what you can see on the picture. So dahil maitim na itong bark ng tree, naging pabor siya doon sa black na peppered moths. O ibig sabihin, alin na ang mas madaling makuha ngayon? Siyempre itong light color. This means that after some time or over time, the mutated black peppered moths were naturally selected to survive, and they became far more numerous in urban areas than the pale variety. So that's all for today. I will be ending my discussion with a short quote from Charles Darwin. So according to him, it is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but rather the one most adaptable to change. Once again, I am Ma'am Dea. Thank you for watching my video lessons, and see you next time. Bye!